From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason Van Schie, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How did Joelle?
Well, it's our first recording back after our holiday break.
Yep, first of 2023. So even though this will be coming a bit later for our listeners, it is the first recording.
Our first recording of the year. Yeah.
And how are you feeling about that, Joelle?
Look, I'm happy to be back to meeting our guests and finding out all about them. The 7 a.m. wake up is a bit of a struggle after 2 weeks of sleeping in every day. So, still in the process of realigning my circadian rhythms.
Yes. I didn't take as long off as what you did, so I didn't butcher my sleep cycle as much as you did. So I'm back into routine already. So I'm probably going to have to bring the pep today, and you'll be along for the journey.
Isn't that how we normally do it?
Yeah, pretty much.
I wouldn't describe myself as peppy.
Yeah. For our video, if people joining us on the video, you are wearing a nice lavender
I am.
T-shirt.
We've got new branded clothes, everybody. It's very exciting.
New swag.
Yes.
So our marketing department finally settled on our brand and logo. So,
we've got our new embroidered logos, which you can't see because the microphone's in the way. But
and we're embracing the startup vibe. We're going for t-shirts rather than polos.
Yep. I like it. I like the lavender.
Yeah, it's nice colour. Purple on purple. Great. All right. Well, look, we probably should introduce our guest today.
Yeah.
First guest of the year. She has extensive experience in HSE functions within the resources sector and holds qualifications in education, science, and environmental management. She is the founder and director of Universal Safety Wellness. A warm welcome to the podcast, Angelina Badri.
Hello.
Hello, Angela. Sorry.
It happens to everyone. It happens to everyone.
No. I'm just going to let our listeners know that before the podcast, Joelle said to me, Jason, are you sure you're going to be able to pronounce this right? And we checked the last name and did not check the first name. It is Angelina Badri. My apologies.
You said it right when you were reading it. And then you immediately,
It's what I do. And I really know that it's not, nice to not get people's names right. But Angelina.
Yes.
We're going to become fast friends.
Love that.
Yeah. And so we'll not get it wrong in the future. But look, really glad to have you on the podcast as our first official guest recording for 2023.
Yes,
looking forward to the conversation today.
I have to admit, I've been holding in while you were saying about the start of 2023. Hoo-hoo! So I'm excited and I'm looking forward to all that's to come.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big year for psych health and safety. So
for sure.
Really interested. Yeah.
Yep. Some big reforms happening.
Yes.
Some surprises just before Christmas and over the break. It's all happening.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, as you know, we like to ask our guests some nice, easy questions before we get into the more interesting stuff. So, what are your favorite podcasts, Angelina?
I have to say, I am loving Jay Shetty on Purpose, and have also been resonating with Tom Bilyeu around that impact theory. I find that listening to conversations that are really connected with people and their story, their struggles, and how they've also overcome that is something that inspires me. So they've been ones that I kind of refer back to and listen to and enjoy many times. But I will also say I will admit to enjoying a bit of the Joe Regan experience. I like a little bit of humor. And so for me, it's what brings you joy, what makes you, laugh and have fun. And it's really looking at those connected conversations.
Smartless is a good one for a laugh as well.
Nice. I'll put that down.
Yep. That's
I've listened to a few of those episodes.
Yeah. No, they're funny dudes.
Did you see the Murderville episode with
No, not yet. No.
It's worth a watch. It's worth a watch.
I will have a look at that one. Yeah. Will Arnett is one of my favorite actors. So
Nice.
So tell us all about your professional career.
Yeah, so I'd have to say that I've got a pretty diverse background in terms of my career. I've spent over 15 years in many different high-risk work environments. So I started off in the oil and gas space and worked in organizations really establishing their frameworks, their processes and tools, because that's where I thought really that was where safety had the biggest impact. It was when I started my career, it was you need to have everything fine tuned. And if you have all those tools in place, then you won't have people injured. And then I got to realize that there was such an important requirement to really connect with the hearts and minds of the people doing the job. Because as much as you can have these tools and these processes, people were unfortunately still being hurt in the industry. So I was very privileged to then be able to take on different roles in different businesses. So I stepped in and went through my career in coordinator roles, advisor roles, team lead, manager, senior leader. But what I enjoyed was the diversity of the work environments I went to. So I'll give you a little bit of a fast track of my experience. So I've worked in refineries, on construction sites, in major hazard facilities, on drilling and well servicing rigs, depots, mining environments, so open cut and underground. Anywhere that I really thought that there was that potential for that exposure of risk for individuals, anywhere that I found people were being potentially exposed to that line of fire, I felt very passionate to want to go and have an understanding of the why. Why is it that we build these processes and have these tools, and yet we're not finding that people are being empowered to actually be safer in their work environment? So yeah, I kind of floated around and spread myself throughout all those environments.
Yep. Similar background to me, I guess, in that sort of petroleum and mining in the safety realm. So yeah, lots of commonalities there.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So Angelina, you're now the founder of Universal Safety Wellness. Be interested to know all about that.
Yeah, perfect. So I went through my career and found that it was probably every 3-year mark. I kind of finished out doing projects or supporting businesses get to a certain level. And I still felt so compelled to support the industry to actually make a positive change. And I felt quite restricted in the sense of working for one organization. I was only able to do that within their business and not necessarily have a wider footprint to support. And so I basically went out on my own to provide the opportunity to give that holistic support to the industry as a whole. And so I established Universal Safety Wellness and have been very humbled at the opportunities that have been provided to me to help businesses really navigate and change the way that they operate in that space.
Yeah, great. And when did you start the business?
I'd say it was approximately 4 years ago.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And what sort of clients are you servicing primarily?
So still within the space of high risk environments. So business in oil and gas. I'm working heavily in the mining space. And what I'm finding, which is exciting, and even though it's kind of, we talked about the changes when we started these conversations, right? What's to come, the exciting things. I found that the conversations are changing, which is exciting. When I started 4 years ago, I was really, a big advocate for pushing and having those conversations about safety well-being and talking about how we need to take a different approach and how do we support people to thrive in the work environment instead of just, struggling to survive. And I'm finding that we've come to a change where people and business owners and individuals in these companies are very willing to actually have conversations about, well, what can we do differently? Because we need to make a change.
Yeah, we're definitely observing the same. We noticed ourselves, right? When we started the business in 2018, it was like, hey, guys, have you thought about taking more of a systemic approach to how you do workplace mental health and stop doing all these wellness initiatives that, don't seem to be turning the dial? We got frustrated and decided to start educating people instead.
Nice.
And that's why we started the podcast almost 2 years to the date. Actually, this will come out after our 2-year anniversary.
It will, yeah.
Yeah. We're doing anything for our 2-year anniversary?
We should.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess then by the time this one comes out, we will have done an anniversary.
Wasn't that second anniversary episode amazing?
That was fantastic.
Those guests.
Just
I could not believe that they got that person on that.
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a
great.
bit of a tangent.
Love it.
But yeah, we're observing the same in that people are going, like during the COVID response, everyone's like, well, mental health's a real challenge and it's an immediate need. And they just kind of threw everything at it. But now they're becoming more strategic and going, well, actually, the majority of those initiatives didn't actually work. We do need to do something that's a bit more risk-based or systemic focus rather than, individual self-care focused. And yeah, no, people are primed. And I think it's perfect timing in terms of market maturity and an understanding of what works and what doesn't work and the new regs. So it's, quite an interesting time.
I agree. And I appreciate you making that comment. It is very much, I think, about that education piece. And what I found is there's a lot of learning that has been happening. A lot of organizations have gone through, moments of that, oh shit, we were working in a way that we thought normal businesses operate. And even though there were people still struggling in the workplace before COVID hit, it happened. And then they had to look at how they did business. A lot of organizations streamlined and wanted to then be more effective. But then what I found in a lot of organizations were that the number of people that were negatively impacted actually increased, because now there's businesses that are, running lean, but have bombarded people with more responsibility, more requirements, and no support in that change process. And so unfortunately, my heart went out sitting there talking to people going, okay, well, how do we, look at the role efficiently, look at these changes in the business, to understanding that, the way we need to do business has changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on to our topic for today, and it's our regular listeners might be a bit surprised at the topic, since we do often complain about concept confusion and the conflation of terms. So to get us started, can you remind our listeners, or for those who maybe haven't listened before, what is the difference between psychological safety and psychological health and safety?
Sure. It's a very good question. I think on the daily, people can get confused with it. And sometimes I get confused as well. For me, when I look at psychological safety, it's about really establishing and maintaining an environment that encourages people to recognize and be rewarded for their contributions. So feeling comfortable to raise issues, feeling comfortable to speak up, where they're not then ridiculed or there's no negative impact on that. It's really looking at establishing that foundation of supporting people feel comfortable. When I then look to think of that psychological health and safety, it's that mental well-being aspects around your psychological health, how you think and feel, and how that then influences your well-being.
Yeah. And so we would add to that and say, psychological health and safety is also about the conditions of work. So whether that's your physical working environment, the systems and tools that you're working with, and the social aspects of work as well, and how they can either positively or negatively impact your mental health, and the role of the employer in actually shaping those working conditions to optimize mental health.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it.
Yeah. So, the way I conceptualize it is psychological safety is like employees having voice and being able to bring up things without fear of repercussion. And then psychological health and safety is, that risk management process to ensure that people go home without being negatively impacted by the work environment. Yeah. But I guess in terms of psychological safety, which we're going to focus on today, what impact does that have on an organization's ability to identify psychosocial hazards and assess risk?
Yeah, for me, this is a big one, because what I find is if those organizations that have, been fearful to address those psychosocial aspects tend to create a lot of blind spots. And that tends to, unfortunately, allow for the risks to be unmanaged and then escalate. So I'm quite surprised when I go into organizations and we talk about, psychological health and safety, psychological safety. There's this whole concept of we're doing okay in a business where, unfortunately, when you then have conversations with individuals, they're struggling. They're feeling overworked. They feel that they're unsupported. I've been recently having conversations looking at human performance and having conversations with people in the workplace, asking them about their motivations and their decision making. And I can tell you that nearly every location I've been to, every work environment with operators to executives, one of the, big drivers around that decision-making factor is fear. fear of losing my job, fear of, speaking up and then being treated like others in the work environment. So it's really important to establish that baseline understanding of those psychological hazards and how you can then manage that. But people have to be open and willing to have those conversations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The number of times I've heard of a company jumping straight into a risk assessment without making sure they've got the right conditions for people to actually raise like issues with what's going on.
Yep.
It got to the point where actually Joelle recommended, which we took on, that we put in our baseline survey, a measure of psychological safety to be able to hotspot and go, actually, are there areas of the business or are there particular teams where people aren't safe to raise these issues when doing the risk assessment? So
that's very impactful. I think that's great. And I think because for me, I'm astonished at the way that fear has then influenced businesses. So I'll go in and do a baseline assessment as an example, and I'll look at some of those, the documents, the risk assessments. And when I've done my analysis and I'm presenting to the CEO and the senior leadership team, I'm somewhat dumbfounded by the fact that they seem to be so disconnected to the organization at times. And I'm sitting there going, how are you not aware of the culture and the hardship and the struggles when to me it's evident? And then looking at those documents, then questioning, well, who participated in this? And finding that it's a picture that people want to depict. And because they struggle with having, hard conversations because of that potential ramification.
Yeah, and that's the problem we see with that, top-down approach, right? When you're not consulting with the workers on the front line and just assuming, people would have told us if there was an issue.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't have psychological safety, as you're saying, no, they're not going to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that there's also this desire to share the good news and make sure you keep people feeling comfortable. And so what I found it's so important in moving into this year that, doing things like what we're doing, having a conversation, and also enabling people to understand how to have connected conversations is what's very powerful. Because even though there might be areas of weakness in a business or improvement opportunities, it's how we address those topics and have the conversations and provide a pathway to improve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so interestingly, actually, I was chatting with a client the other day who had a near miss, and the operator who was involved, it would have been fatal, and he didn't report the incident for fear of being fired. So, right there is just a great example of a consequence of poor psychological safety.
Yeah, and that was a client that thought that they actually were doing really well in this space.
Yeah, they thought that they were, doing reasonably well. Yeah, so it certainly has impacts beyond, beyond the just inside of an individual.
Absolutely.
And impacts the broader ability of an organization to actually manage risk effectively. So I guess the converse or the other side of the coin there, if we've got strong psychological safety, what impact can that have on something like psychosocial hazard identification for an organization?
Well, from what I've seen, it actually allows people to better identify and invest energy in that prevention and the management of those aspects of risk. What I've found, like we said, in the reverse, I guess, of an environment where there's that culture of care and well-being, people are more proactive. They're comfortable to have conversations to identify if they're feeling overwhelmed, if they need support, if there's aspects that, they actually need to lean on others to help them in a space. I'm always so dumbfounded when, in my career, I've had people say to me, Ange, how did you get the results you have? Because, knock on wood, in those years, I haven't had a fatality or permanent injury working with people in such a high risk environment. And what I found is it's having the ability to have those conversations, as we mentioned, get an understanding of how people are feeling, what they're thinking, because many of us go to work and we still have a lot of our personal issues. We're dealing with things that are taking up our train of thought. I recall going on a location once and I was interacting with an operator, one of the best operators, had many, many years experience. And on that day, in just observing the way that the job was being conducted, I could tell that their mind was clouded. It wasn't a smooth dance as it usually is when they're working on location. And so I had the courage to intervene and ask a question from compassion and care to say, how are you feeling? What's going on? What are you thinking? Because to me, I can see that, there may be a few things that we might have to go back and review in terms of like isolations. Do they have the permit to work system in place? And what I found, and I was very humbled by the honest conversation, was this individual then said to me, no, you know what? I've got a lot of things on my mind. I've got health issues, things going on in my family. And so I realized that all of that was clouding their judgment. And we were able to then remove them from that environment and ensure that then those controls were put into place adequately. So if you have an environment that fosters that care, that ability for people to have conversations, to make an observation and actually say, I genuinely care for your well-being, your mental state, your emotional state. How can I help you, or what do I need? It can really influence that outcome where we don't have people being harmed.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode.
Yeah, that reminds me of the blue pie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Tim.
Yeah, from that was from our first year.
Yeah.
Yeah. That idea that the more, we've only got so much amount of concentration or focus, and the more that there are other stressors going on in our life, that just reduces our capacity to actually give the focus to our working environment. So, as much as employers might like to think that their staff can compartmentalize home life from work life, that's just not how it works.
Absolutely. It can be very challenging.
Yeah. And similar, I remember having these discussions around fatigue management with team leaders when doing supervisor training and going, okay, someone comes in fatigued because they've got a newborn baby and they haven't had a great sleep. Whose responsibility is it? Well, it's the employer's responsibility still to manage the risk. The employee is doing the best they can in, not the best circumstances for sleep.
Yeah.
They're coming to work fatigued. So how are you supporting them to make sure there's not an incident that occurs? So, the same thing with the mental health stuff. You can't, if someone's marriage is breaking down or they're in severe financial distress and they're really stressed because of those things, or if there's a global pandemic, and they're stressed about all the, health implications and whatever else. But you can't control those things as a team leader. But you can be controlling the workload allocation, role ambiguity, supervisor support. You've got a lot of direct control over those things.
Spot on. Absolutely.
And I think if you simplify that for team leaders and go, well, no, you don't have to worry about everything, but it is still a risk that they're coming in with and you need to manage it. And so you need to accommodate those people, not, say, oh, that's a home leash, you don't bring it to work, because it comes into work regardless of what you ask.
I broke my leg at home and I'll just pretend that it's not broken while I'm at work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And I think there probably needs to be more conversations around that exact point, because I've seen, a lot of even individuals will reach out to me for some guidance and say, Ange, I had, say, for example, a rig manager that informed me that one of their team members identified in conversation that they were suicidal. And for them, then they didn't really have any training and coaching. And they went to then say, well, how should we respond? And it was very much that mentality of, well, get them off location because then that won't be an issue, and use the EAP. And it's just, we need to get better at empowering these people, these leaders, individuals and organizations to understand how it's all interrelated. We need to have that holistic approach to being able to support people in the workplace.
That's just that's bordering on like a psychopathic response. Like get them away from work, and then as long as it doesn't happen at work, it doesn't matter.
Well, I don't know if that was the intention. I'm choosing to believe it's ignorance rather than psychopathic.
I said bordering on.
Yeah, but we don't know the intention behind it.
No, but it's, yeah. That's certainly how it would, if you were that individual who just expressed suicidal intent and then they were like, okay, go home.
Yeah, and here's the number to the EAP.
Yeah. That's not.
No.
Yeah.
The company we spoke to yesterday, they had a really good process for managing the known psychosocial hazards because they're basically running an EAP. They're doing they've got their own specialist psychologists who are doing the EAP work, and they're farming out to those people rather than going through an intermediary EAP organization that often then has their own associate psychologists who to meet the geographical needs of different clients. So they had a lot more control over, what speciality, the different psychs had in the team, and could do better quality assurance.
And also then getting them early access into their workers' compensation provider for psychological injury as well. So actually facilitating people into that process earlier on.
And despite the high in the industry that they're in, the high potential for psychological injury, when people did have a psychological injury, it was almost half the median time off work compared to the national average.
Yeah.
So it was quite impressive.
That's
very
fantastic.
Impressive. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I think, it comes to then sharing that with others, because what I've found is, people don't necessarily have that intent to not care, but they don't know how to actually provide that support. And for them, it's just an instant reaction of, well, whatever they think is available and whatever they think is the best path forward, they'll tend to follow.
I'll have to ask that person actually if she'd like to come on the podcast and talk about that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
All right. So if we go back to the topic of today, though, which is psychological safety, right? It's typically understood as a team construct rather than an individual or organizational construct. So does that mean responsibility for psychological safety should rest solely with the team leader?
No, I think it takes the collective, to be honest, because you can in an organization have one person who's an advocate, but if there are multiple people then that are providing an environment where people aren't feeling safe or they're being degraded, then it doesn't collectively help establish that environment. It's really about that shared expectation that everyone supports each other to be able to have the means to express themselves without rejection and embarrassment. So for me, I always say it takes the collective for us to really create that environment.
Yeah, it can't happen in isolation. Just say it's just the team leader, and they've got so many other things that they've got to juggle as well. They do really need to be supported from the top down, and then
100%. I see a lot of team leaders with all the best intent. To be honest, sometimes have the shittiest jobs, right? They have so much that they're responsible for, they're accountable for, they're trying to manage a number of different people. And sometimes, unfortunately, even their responses, though, can come off in a different way. So, for example, whilst they care for the well-being of their team members, because their priorities may be so redirected and they've got so much, they're managing their thoughts, they can come off abrasive or have conversations that are short because their time is so limited. So it's the weight of the world shouldn't be on their shoulders.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of that also comes down to the organizational systems that they need to work within. And things like, how workload is allocated and, the scheduling and all of that sort of thing, your performance management systems, all of those types of things, I think, feed into the ability and capacity of a leader to actually be able to create that that psychologically safe team. If you've got organizational systems that actually don't facilitate that, if you've got, incident investigation processes that are focused on blame, for example, and, looking for who broke the procedure, who violated the rule, then it doesn't matter how psychologically safe your immediate team environment is. If that's, if that's your organizational system.
Yeah, very true.
A team leader could have done a great job.
Yeah.
Setting up the psychological safety of their team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess I'm interested from your perspective and in your experience, what are the things that organizations can do to help facilitate that or create the conditions to foster psychological safety at a team level?
Yeah. And, I think you've touched upon some of them. So for me, I've been helping organizations reframe the way that they've established their processes and structures and looking at how they actually empower individuals. So looking at those aspects of how their organization operates, and we'll use, for example, the incident report, like you mentioned, and identifying, is it a just culture model that they're using? And moving away from, the old school of, I just want Bob gone. I'm going to blame one person, and if I get rid of them, then that's the answer to the problems that I have. So for me, I work with organizations, and we look at most aspects of their business, the structure, the roles, the requirements, the processes, the support that they have in place, and identify how they're actually performing in those areas. I last year attended the Queensland Mining Health annual conference. Really great. And it was interesting because on this topic, everyone was talking about the aspirations to be a high reliability organization. And what does that mean in terms of how do we get to being mature and then move away from having incidents and all of this? But it was so interesting because even when you look at this model in terms of cultural maturity, organizational maturity, I was interested in having a conversation once when I led a workshop with senior executives. And there was this whole notion of, well, that costs money to operate in that space and have that performance. That's a hell of a lot of money with safety programs and initiatives. But when you looked at the characteristics of organizations that reached that state, it was demonstrating care, trust, integrity, things that actually don't cost you money to be able to establish. So I think we need to really start looking at and reframing how businesses are operating.
Yeah, and it's almost looking at like what is the mindset of, starting from the executive but right through the leadership, and how is it that those individuals actually view their role, the role of the worker, if we want to use that type of language, and actually sort of doing some reframing around that, that it I think moving out of that transactional relationship approach and actually looking at it as this is actually an interpersonal relationship that we're involved in here between as an employer and an employee. It's not just a transaction, but it is actually a relationship, and we need to treat it as such.
Well, absolutely, because we're all purpose driven and everybody wants to feel like they're value adding. And so if we're able to foster those relationships and allow people to feel and acknowledge that, they are cared for, they do provide that piece of the puzzle that helps everything else come together, it allows them not to feel like a number. Like, it breaks my heart how many individuals I have crossed paths with that have said to me, Ange, it's been very rare that I haven't been in an organization and just felt like a number. And that's really unfortunate because we all have so much to give and we shouldn't just be seen as a number.
Yeah.
Hey, one thing, which slide aside, this idea of just culture versus psychological safety. Is there any difference between the two? Because I feel they're very, very similar concepts, and it's like, we're not going to blame the individual. We're going to look at the root cause or systemic failures rather than going straight to the individual and their fault, which then makes people go, well, does that then foster psychological safety? But there's this idea of
the issue with just culture, I think, is that it's been sort of turned into a formula or like a decision tree, and I think the intent behind it is probably very similar to psychological safety, in that it's about making sure that there's accountability, but that it's accountability at the right levels and sort of for the right reasons. But then, as with a lot of things that James Reason did, when he sort of develops these models that are simple to understand, but there's actually a lot more complexity that sits behind them, people just grab onto the top level simple model and sort of run with that. And so I think that the application of this very complex idea of just culture has been grossly oversimplified to the point that it's really just a very blunt tool. And it's very easy still to sort of go through that decision tree and go, but, yep, here's where it's your fault. And then this is now the disciplinary consequence that we're going to apply to you. And it, depending on the severity, it might be that we send you to retraining, which is just a stupid response to basically anything, unless your training is garbage in the first place. You shouldn't have people doing jobs that they're not trained and competent in doing. So that's a you failure, not a them failure. But yeah, basically everything else is just how can we land on the most severe consequence for this person using this just culture model, to the extent that people will refer to it as I've been just cultured.
Oh, God.
Haven't heard that one.
No, me neither.
So that's my view on it, Angelina. I'm
yeah,
not sure if
I would
you've got a
agree.
different view.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think, unfortunately, and with many processes, a lot of people oversimplify and change it and tweak it and utilize it with the wrong intent of how it should have been used. But yeah, it's definitely left for a lot of interesting conversations.
Yeah, interesting. I've got a new term.
Just cultured.
Just cultured. So, Angelina, one of the questions we like to ask all of our guests is, looking into the future, what would your hopes for the future of workplace mental health be?
I really hope moving forward, we're able to reshape how we support people in that space. I'd really love for us to be able to elevate people to help them strengthen their mental and emotional well-being, like focusing even on changing the narrative in the way that we speak in workplaces, the way that we empower people, and, focus on that human performance, which then leads to organizational, performance improvements, is a big thing. I really want people to be able to thrive more in workplaces. Like, I'm still so, as I mentioned, just saddened by some of the stories people share with me about the negative impact workplaces have on them. I've had people that have, had to be medicated, people that have had physical reactions, rashes, things all associated from that work environment. And we spend so much of our time in workplaces that I would love for it to, be a place where we enjoy, where we laugh, we have fun, we empower each other. It shouldn't be a struggle. I laugh with people because I always talk about it like it's a workplace survivor. Can you outwit and outlast? Because there's someone that's going to try and take out your, little smoke stick and vote you off the island. But it shouldn't have to be that way. We shouldn't have to always be thinking about, well, what's the political angle that someone's taking? Who's trying to stab me in the back? That's exhausting. All of that stuff is exhausting. We should be able to show up, enjoy ourselves, contribute, value add, and really thrive in a place where we can all collectively work together.
It's a good aspiration.
Yeah.
Joelle, out of your grasp.
Out of my grasp?
Yeah.
Yeah, up yours.
We got too much psychological safety here is the issue, I think.
You started it. So do you have words of advice then for listeners who are interested in working in the field of psych health and safety?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of, being part of the change you want to see. And if you have aspirations for supporting people in that space, don't be scared to also take these different approaches that a lot of organizations were fearful of. Bring back that humanistic approach and really help people to show the value of having care, compassion, and courage. That there's so much space in terms of what we can do to positively impact people. And I really hope that, individuals step into those roles and help change the industry, change the globe and help people in that space.
Yeah, and it is such a growth area at the moment that we really do need, everybody who's interested should be stepping up and, there's a fantastic community of people out there, really willing to share their knowledge and expertise and help people to learn and grow in the area. So I think, even if you feel like you don't have necessarily the qualifications or experience, you can get started and you can reach out for support to those networks of people.
Yeah, and definitely with those people that do have the qualifications and experience, we do love collaborating with those. And in fact, we're aware of 2 people who have very good experience who are going to be hanging out their own shingles shortly as well. So hopefully we'll be able to feature them on the podcast soon and share what they're doing. Yeah.
Yep.
Terrific. Well, Angelina, that was actually I shouldn't say actually.
Wow.
I'll take that back.
Wow.
When I saw the topic around psychological safety, I had my doubts, but it actually was a really interesting and enjoyable discussion, and it was a real pleasure having you on.
I'm glad, and I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to have the conversation.
Yeah, and where can people find out more about what you do at Universal Safety Wellness? Is this the first? Look, it's the first episode of the year.
You get to use that.
No judgment here. This is a safe space.
Yeah, USW.
Yes, I love it. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn if people want to connect with me there, and also the website universalsafetywellness.com. Has a lot of information and reference to that holistic approach that I mentioned.
Yeah, terrific. So we'll put something in the episode notes. I will
put a link in the episode notes. Yep.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Angelina. And listeners, that brings us to the end of this episode. So don't forget, you will be able to catch the video if you prefer the video over the audio on the Flourish DX YouTube channel. You can also find snippets of these great conversations that we have with amazing guests on the Flourish DX LinkedIn page. While you're over on LinkedIn, you can connect with Angelina, and you can also connect with myself and Joelle if you'd like to continue the conversation. But that's it for today. We'll catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.